medically understood.
Hello, hello. We're in.
All right, Ben.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Been a week of COVID, which has
Excellent.
absolutely sucked 7 times. I think I'm some sort of world record holder having it 7 times.
I think you're patient zero.
Yeah, maybe I am COVID. I don't know, but yeah, but just about over that. And what about you? You good?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm back to work now. Everything's launching into 2024. But we're not here to talk about ourselves, are we? We've got a very special guest today. Would you like to do a little introduction, Rich?
Yeah, yeah. So we didn't really know what to call this show. We were thinking about calling it Role Models, which sort of still fits, but in the end we decided to call it My Oldest Friend because on the line, all the way from Eastleigh in Nottingham, we have a man who's known me since I was born, and he's also like literally my oldest friend. Because I hope you don't mind, G, but tomorrow is your 80th birthday, isn't it?
Oh, happy birthday!
So
Congratulations.
I believe, yes.
So welcome to the show, my oldest friend, one of my best friends in the entire world, and a man who's full of knowledge, which he is about to dump onto our faces. Gary Griff, how's it going, G?
Yeah, all right, yes. Hasn't been a good year so far, but I'm sure it will improve greatly.
4 days in or whatever it is. Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
7.
yeah. You've been flooded, haven't you?
Well, flooded would be an exaggeration. It seeped in a bit, and I've got a few carpet tiles drying, but it hasn't been pleasant. Yeah.
Well, things can only get better, I'm guessing, man. Have you two met? I think you two have met briefly once.
We have,
We
yes.
did briefly once.
Yeah,
yes.
I've
yes.
got. In fact, I've got a photo of the occasion to put up on screen. I'm very proud of having dug this out. We met at our mutual friend's wedding. Hang on, let me stick it up. There it is. When I was slightly younger, I had hair. I still had hair. Oh, wonderful times. But yeah, I think we met. That was just that one. I think that one occasion, maybe it's difficult to remember. I mean, I've known Rich for half my life, but you two, I don't know how you met or what's the story behind that. How do you two know each other?
Mainly because Richard is the son of one of my very, very big friends, George, who I do play tennis with, play chess with, and all sorts of other things, socialise a lot, and Rich and I just became friends, prompted through music, I think, wasn't it, Rich?
Yeah, probably more your taste in music rather than mine. I still don't think in 43 years I've ever found a song that you like.
True, yeah.
But yeah, we've known each other, since I was born, I guess. So
probably, yeah.
That's going back. Jeez, wow. And so I think like the idea of this show, G, was me and Ben often talk about how things have changed in our lives over the years, and let's face it, we have half the experience that you do, and we were just sort of hoping to get your perspective and talk a bit about your life, if that's all right, and like the journey you've been on so far.
Okay.
But it goes a lot longer, but like what year were you born? Like, what was happening?
Well, 80 years ago exactly, Rich.
Don't ask me to do the maths.
I leave you to calculate that. 44.
Wow. So like what's like childhood like back then?
Can I just intervene for a second, because I find this so amusing. I'm a teacher as a profession, and I spend a lot of time with kids, and it's only recently, and maybe in the last 10 years, that they've started to look at me differently because I've become an old man. But we talk about things like technology in class a lot, and when I mention things like growing up without a mobile phone, they look at me like I've said that I grew up in a windmill or a cave or something. It's something ridiculous for them. And it's interesting that we're kind of having the same conversation here. It's one of the things that fascinates me, because I don't know if there's a greater disparity nowadays with 10, 15 years ago, or if it's the same in this conversation talking about 80 years ago. So yeah, just to reiterate what Richard said, what was it like growing up in the 40s in a cave?
Yeah, what a good question. Yeah, blimey.
I mean, you didn't travel everywhere by horse, did you? That's a fallacy.
No. But my dad had a car, so we went to see Uncle Bert in Cambridge. We did that sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, my earliest memories, really, or my proper memories, were of when we moved to Clacton-on-Sea in Essex, and I was. Well, I won't say I was a beach bum, but you spend a lot of time on the beach. And in the summer, we spent all the time down the beach with your mates playing football. And I worked there, so technology, it doesn't really enter into it, really.
Well, even the holidays are different, as you say, because, I think it's a relatively modern concept. Traveling abroad is so easy nowadays that most people will go to another country, but yeah, certainly in the 40s, in the 50s, you'd go to the beaches in England. Just for reference, I live in Spain, so we do have a couple of Spanish listeners.
Right.
They don't fully understand that we do actually have beaches that are quite nice in England. And
Yeah.
they argue with me about that quite a lot, but they're nice, aren't they, the beaches in the UK?
On a nice day, yeah.
Yeah. It's not always
Clacton,
raining.
back in the day, Clacton was like the place to be, wasn't it?
It's one of the top resorts, one of the nearest to London. I mean, Brighton in the south, but Clacton for anybody who wasn't in the south of London. And we had a Butlins at Clacton, and I worked there, in fact.
Did you?
Yeah. And in those days, something like 20,000 people came every week to Butlin. So the population of the town almost doubled.
Wow.
In the summer. It was a beach place in those days. It was a much more recognizable resort than it is today, for example, where it's nothing. Yeah.
So you were working in Butlins in like the 50s, early 60s?
My first job when I left university was at Butlins. Yeah.
What were you doing?
I was. It's quite interesting. I was. Speaking of differences, in those days, these 20,000 people, I was in administration, and we had a line of cash desks, about 15 of them. And of course, everybody was coming with cash, because even checks were viewed with a lot of suspicion in those days. So, families of 5 were coming to the desk and paying great wads of fivers and what have you. And my job was, when any of the cashiers' tills got full of cash, they'd take it round the back, and there are 2 rooms. I was in one room where the cash went, and my colleague was in the other room where all the paperwork went. And we had to. They wouldn't let either of us go home until we had exactly the same amount of money and cash. But there was a point. I was sitting there in this room where security wasn't brilliant, with over £1 million in cash on this little table.
Wow. I mean, that sounds great, but I was envisaging you as a kind of Heidi High, those
red coat.
Red coat.
Exactly.
No, I'm not enough fun, I'm afraid.
But it must have been cool working in like a seaside resort in the early 60s, G. Like what?
Yeah, not at Butlins, because they were hard-nosed people, very, very hard-nosed people. But they did actually. I left to go and work in computers in London, and they were desperate for me to stay and have a career with Butlins, but wasn't for me.
What was like the scene like in Clacton? Was it a little bit like, was it mods? Was it rockers?
Oh,
Was it that
well,
kind of thing?
the mods and rockers war, if you like, broke out on Clacton at Easter.
Yeah, that's right.
While
yeah.
I was walking up and down the beach at the time, though I didn't know it had happened. But you couldn't, you wouldn't really notice it unless you were, a policeman having to go and control it. I only knew it had happened because it was on telly or the papers or something.
Mm.
But the scene, there's nothing riotous. There weren't nightclubs. There were a few bars, obviously, but it wasn't Saint-Tropez, Monaco.
So it didn't quite manage to keep you there then, did it? But that's like your first job. Like, so sorry, we've skipped a bit. You went to uni, didn't you? Back when going to university mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad always says something like it was like the top 1% of the country went to
That's
uni
right.
back then. What was
That's
your
right.
uni like? What did you study? What was it? Where
Well,
did you go?
I got the first Bachelor of Arts in mathematics in the country.
Wow.
Sheffield University, yeah. So I did maths because that was what I was quite good at school, and I did a BA because my subsidiary subject was French, and the other 50 guys and girls on the honours maths course were all doing physics and chemistry as subsidiaries, and I was doing French. So I was pretty crap at magnetohydrodynamics.
Me too.
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm very outspoken on education. I think it's this education machine that everybody adheres to is a bad mistake, in my opinion. I got nothing from my university at all.
Oh, just as a quick tangent, how do you feel that it compares nowadays? I don't know if you're very in touch with what's going on in the universities and the schools now, but do you think that it's improved, or do you think it's worse than it was when you were coming up?
It's hugely different, I'll say that. As Richard said, it was only 1% were going to university in my day. And the government paid your grant and your accommodation and everything, by the way. Quite radical, yeah. And one thing that, it's become much more available. It's become much more essential to go to university, which I think is a mistake. All these kids getting in huge debts for dubious returns, I think. Anyway, could spend the whole time talking about education. One thing that I admire enormously is things like the Open University and distance learning. I think there should be much more of that. I admire that greatly, the Open University in particular, but there are others, aren't there? Yeah. But in my day, if you could go to university, you did, because in those days, it did guarantee lots of things simply because you'd gone to university. And I don't think that's true anymore, is it? It's, it doesn't disqualify you now rather than it qualifies you.
What did it qualify you for, G?
Well, it was just so few who had a degree, My teachers, for example, if you had a degree, you were a teacher. You didn't have to know anything about teacher or go to teachers training. There was such shortage of graduates. It was a mark of your intellectual superiority, sort of thing. So, which it's not anymore, is it, at all, really?
Oh no, me and Ben have both got degrees.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. They let anyone have them these days. But the problem is that I mean, you have to get one, as you said, but at the same time, everybody's got one, so it's not worth anything, and it's really expensive. So I don't know. Yeah,
Took
free
the words out of
education.
my mouth then. Yeah.
Whilst at uni, G,
Yeah.
like an ongoing theme in your life, I think, and something that we connected over a bit was music. Like, what were you listening to?
Oh, nothing at university. No, it was a dead period for me. I just had to sit through it, and I did. Yeah.
Right. Just head down in a book of
Yeah.
calculations.
Yeah. And I really didn't learn nothing. I memorized lots of pages of numbers, but wasn't quite sure why.
Doesn't sound like uni now. Like I look back at uni and think, oh, that was quite good fun.
Yeah.
Like, was it fun back then, or was it like just
And
so
not for
serious?
me. No, it was purgatory for me. It was dreadful, waste of time.
What was it, being away from home, or?
No, had a lovely hall of residence. Got no friends. Didn't enjoy the work. Didn't really enjoy the. Perhaps that's because they're all mathematicians. I don't know.
Maybe.
I should have probably done social science or something, or art.
That's odd to me though, because that sounds like the opposite of you now. Like, because you're like the most gregarious, outgoing person I know, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't a success, Rich. I also, following university, I worked in London for several years. In fact, probably 5 years, I think. And as part of that, I also went to Imperial College in London.
Okay, what was that, like an add-on, or?
That was a master's.
Okay.
Because I'd left Butlins after uni to get this job with an engineering company in London. And this was, day 2 of computing. So, I've seen the whole of computing. Well, apart from the last 10 years, I lived through computing, if you like. It was quite interesting. But I did technical computing in the engineering company, but I wasn't happy with technical computing, and so I went to Imperial to get a master's in computer science.
Wow. Okay, so you must have been like one of the first doing that, no?
Oh, completely. Yeah. That was one of the first courses available, I think. Yeah. And I lived in Notting Hill Gate, which was on the north side of Kensington Gardens, and the college. I just walked over Kensington Gardens, the park, and to the Albert Hall where Imperial College was. So it was quite an environment, really.
What year was this, G?
This would be late 60s.
So come on, now you're in London, late 60s.
Swinging.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
Tell us about that, dude. That must have been, especially after Clacton and Sheffield. That's got to be a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah.
Or not. I don't know.
Well, I'm not very good at living in a slum, which London is, of course.
See, Notting Hill now is like.
No. If you're a multi-millionaire or a professional footballer, it's nice. But in those days, I was sharing basement flats with 3 others, and for quite a lot of money. So it didn't feel, that swinging, to be honest. But we used to go to down to Chelsea. Used to go to Harrods and buy purple corduroy trousers in Harrods, and one of the things that happened while I was living there was the Rolling Stones concert in the park, which you may have heard of.
Yeah.
500,000 people were at that, and that was just 100 yards from my front door. That was quite interesting.
Sounds good, man. But
yeah.
Have you always been pretty driven, G? It sounds like I know you did like really
No,
well at school to get to uni, and then you're the first guy working in computers. You're the
no,
first
no.
guy with it.
I was dragged, not driven. Rich, that applies pretty much to my life. I look back on my life, and almost none of the decisions were mine. And at no point did I ask myself, "What do you want to do? Why are you making this decision? Where's that leading?" Never occurred to me once in my entire life, including today.
Why is that though? Was that just the way it was?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, well, we're all different, aren't we? Aren't we?
Yeah.
I can't really speak on it because I didn't live at the time, but I feel like there was a bit more structure to the paths that were taken by people. It was it was all
Yes.
laid out ahead of you. Like I think of
Yes.
my parents, for example. It was very common that you would get an apprenticeship or something like that.
Yes.
You'd get engaged maybe in your early 20s.
Yes.
You'd have 2 kids. You'd get your mortgage. It was all kind of set up
Yep.
in that way, and I don't think people have that nowadays. And maybe it's the kind of the other side of the coin is that there's too much variety, too many options, too much freedom. Can you have too much freedom? But yeah, I think it's people are don't know what to do with themselves because there are so many things that you can throw yourself at.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair comment, Ben. I remember at university, I don't know if this still happens with is it the milk round they have where, the companies, they would have an event at
yeah.
university where the companies would come and try and recruit you. Do they do that these days?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
But that was extremely structured in those days, and you knew which companies you should be going for. It felt a lot more structured than it is now. You knew the big companies. If you could get a job with IBM, you're made for life, sort of thing. No, that's certainly not true these days. But
Who did you end up working for? Who was it in London, G?
a company called Foster Wheeler, I think, who are still going. They make power stations and refineries and things like that. So it's big time engineering stuff.
But you say you didn't stay in London that long. You were only there for...
No.
What happened to take you out of London?
Well, one thing was a train ride and holiday from Victoria Station to Israel. So I worked in Israel for a year. We spent about 4 months in Istanbul and over a year in Israel.
What were you doing in Israel?
On a kibbutz, picking fruit, and I worked in the kitchen actually. But yeah, interesting actually, and nice. Well, nice people you meet. But there you go. So that was the first thing, and then I decided to go to Australia, and my life changed hugely.
Where did that decision come from? That's quite an extraordinary leap.
Because my wife at the time, who I'd met, she wasn't my wife at the time, but I met this young lady who had just, and we were socially part of the same group in London, and she had booked this bus ride to India on her way to Australia with some friends. So I decided I'd go and see her in Australia. It's easy, as simple as that.
You give me nostalgia for a time I wasn't alive. I think that a lot of the interconnectivity nowadays is, I mean, it's great, it's fantastic, but I love the idea. There's a kind of romanticism, but yeah, I'm sure it wasn't very romantic traveling by bus, long distances.
No, I didn't do that. That bus broke down a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
But nowadays it's just, you jump on a flight to Magaluf and you get pissed for 2 weeks and then come home not remembering having left the country. So I don't know. It just sounds
Oh,
better.
is that right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe so.
Without a wife, but
Yeah.
picking up other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know Isabel. She's known me forever, hasn't she? But so you followed her out to Australia. That's like
No, no, I got a ticket and a job in Australia when she was traveling.
okay.
But she got jaundice and had to return to London because she was ill.
Wow. So then you were in Australia and sort of.
Well, no, I went anyway, and she followed me out because I'd also got a charter flight. Yeah. Anyway, we ended up in Australia. Yeah, in Melbourne.
Like when you talk about things, G, I mean, this isn't like disparaging or anything, not at all. But
Yeah.
like you just, oh yeah, so got a bus to India, moved to Australia, like I think. Do you think it's like just because you've lived it and stuff, nothing feels that big, or do you just not think of these things as big things?
I don't think of them from the side, Rich. That's what happened. I don't. That's what happened, and it, as I said, it changed my life. My eyes were opened. Wow.
So what was so great about Australia? I mean, I can imagine
everything. My salary doubled, my taxation halved, vegetables were larger, the accommodation that I was shown that I could choose from. I assumed that royalty lived in those places. I'd been sharing slum bed sits with 8 people in Kilburn. It was just, and it was sunshine. And, I had a balcony overlooking the orchard, and they were giving me loads of money, and what's to complain about,
Well, it does sound pretty ideal, man.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
How long were you out there?
Over 2 years. I went out with a team of, I think it was 15, because Shell in Melbourne had got this new IBM mainframe computer, and they needed experienced people to go and convert all their stuff. And I knew something about it. So 15 of us went out, and I'm the only one who returned.
Wow. And am I right? You got married in Australia?
In Tasmania, yes.
That was a kind of a, obviously, I'm getting married soon, and we're taking a year to plan it. What was yours like?
Oh, trivial. Well, trivial. It wasn't the 80,000 quid that you're going to spend. If there was nobody at it, we got a guy in off the street to be a witness. Yeah, it wasn't a big event. We hired in Tasmania a Ford Falcon 500. And we drove around in this big American Falcon 500. That was good fun. Except my wife was vomiting throughout the whole thing.
Cars have been another big thing for you, haven't they?
They have, yeah. Well, yes. I'm a car man, really. Yes.
I sent Ben a couple of pics of some of the cars you've had over the years.
Oh, really?
My first.
Well, I'm just looking up the Ford Falcon.
the
Ford Falcon 500, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I vaguely remember you having a Capri at one point.
Yes, I did. Yep.
So that must have been like late 80s. But what about previous to that?
Oh, blimey, now you're asking. Oh, dear. I had a Jaguar XJS at one point. One of the first Golf GTIs when they were famous rather than routine. The most outrageous one was a Nissan 300 ZX.
Yeah, I sent Ben the picture of that. I remember
That
you picking me up in that once, and
one.
it had bucket seats, and I was quite a big kid.
Yeah.
And I remember I couldn't get into the bucket seat, and you just floored it, and it pushed me into the bucket seat.
I'll put the ZX up. Hang on, there we go.
And it had that T-top roof, didn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Ford
Maybe
Falcon 500 looks a little bit like the Starsky and Hutch motor. Is it anything like that, or?
If I knew
It's an
the
old
Starsky
muscle
and
car,
Hutch,
isn't it?
it's probably the same chassis because wasn't that a Ford Mustang or something?
Don't
know.
ask me. Rich
I
might know.
think so. Yeah, it was a Mustang that they had.
Oh, the ZX has it got those uplights?
No, I think they had fixed headlights.
But that was a hell of a car. That was
It's
terrifying.
V10 twin turbo. You know, it was quite fast.
Ben, I don't think I've seen you since this happened, mate. But so last summer, my excuse is I got COVID and I was running a temperature. And I started mucking about on eBay a little bit.
Oh,
and then one day I rang Gary and I said, "Oh, I'm popping over. Guess what I've bought?" And because Gary was such an influence on me growing up, and he had these two Mercs, didn't you? You had a SLK 220 and then the 320, is that right?
320,
Yeah, and I think you were like the first to have them or whatever.
Yeah.
And another story about one of those Mercs, and you say you don't remember this, but this is how I sort of knew you were uber cool. Like you showed up in one of these Mercs, and it was like Mercedes had vomited on you. Like you had a Merc jacket, you had a Merc tennis bag. I think we were off to play tennis or something.
Yeah.
And you opened the door, and I sat down, and I heard this crunch, and I just sat on your brand new Mercedes sunglasses.
Oh no!
And you didn't lose your mind at me, which is like pretty cool. But anyway, yeah. So last summer, then I got COVID. I was running a temperature. That's what I tell Sharon. I just went and bought one of these SLKs that Gary had, and just rocked up at his house. Was like, check me out. You know? I mean, it was 25 years late, but it was pretty cool.
Nice motor though.
Yeah, I like that car. So Australia, after a couple of years, what brought you back? Was that like family? What was?
Yeah, what a good question, Richard. I thought long about that because when I returned, people were saying, "Oh, how was Australia?" And I would say like the things that I just said to you about the size of the vegetables, the sunshine, the accommodation, the salary, and without exception, they all responded, "What on earth are you doing here?" You know. And I was forced to think about that because that's a valid question. And I was the only one who returned, as I say. And the only thing I could come up with was it's home. I wanted to go home. I felt like I was camping in Australia. You know, it wasn't, I don't know, Yorkshire County cricket wasn't happening, and there's all sorts of stuff. It's just home. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like that, Ben?
No.
How long have you been in Spain now?
12 years. It'll be 12 years later this year. But I mean, there are things that I miss, of course. But I mean, maybe I come from a slightly less beautiful part of the country than you. I don't know. I certainly don't miss anything about where I grew up, which is Stevenage, which, as you know, is an overflow car park for London. It's difficult to miss a car park. And then the rest of my time in England, I was in Leeds, which is, Leeds isn't so bad, but no, I mean, it's just better over here.
Do you feel at home?
Yeah. The people are very friendly. There's the culture in general is very welcoming. And it's a better. Maybe about 5 years ago, I would have considered coming home for the right job or the right woman, but I feel now that I'm better off where I am, because I don't know what's happening in the UK. I'm not that I don't have my finger on the pulse at the moment, but I get the impression that it's tougher over there at the moment, with the cost of living and everything. In fact, I have my ex has moved to Leeds. She's living my life in reverse. So she's from here. She's from Zaragoza, where I live now. She's moved to Leeds, and she's thinking about coming back to Spain because it's just too tough.
Really?
Yeah, just the rentals and all of that, and just
Oh yeah,
it's just too expensive.
Yep.
But the countryside. I mean, I miss the. I think England has some of the most beautiful countryside in the world. I miss that.
Yes.
For sure. But otherwise, no. The food's good here as well.
Well, I'd say similar things about Australia, but I left to go home. You know, you obviously don't have that feeling.
No.
And where did that take you then, G? Because at some point you got involved doing your own thing. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I'd got this job with a London consultancy who was sending this team to Australia. And I was employed by them, and they paid my salary through their Australian subsidiary. So when I was returning, I rang them up and said, "Where do I work?" You know, because I was still an employee, and they said Nottingham. "Where's that?" I said. So I ended up in Nottingham, and the first project, because this was a consultancy, they send you out to client sites for this, that, and the other reason. And the first job they had for me was at Cadbury Schweppes in Birmingham, based out of the Nottingham office of the company. So we chose to live in Eastleigh because it's on the Birmingham side of it all. Yeah. So we ended up in Eastleigh.
So you've been in Eastleigh for
long time, since late 70s. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like a fixture, I guess. And at what time did you get? Because you know my memory is a little bit fuzzy, and
not as bad as mine, Rich.
Well,
Yeah, go on.
but so you were doing this consultancy thing,
Yeah.
But then you set up on your own.
Yes.
Because Ben's self-employed. I'm sure he'd appreciate. And I know you've like mentored people in the past, haven't you, in this sort of thing?
A little bit, yeah, not much. Yeah.
So, what advice can you give to someone who's setting up their own business? Or,
blimey. Well,
tell us about yours.
What happened was I worked in the Nottingham office of SPL, which was the company I was working for, and I did lots of interesting projects there, I must say. But in the end, they wanted to close the office, and they offered us relocation or generous redundancy. And while I was deciding what to do, this guy around the corner rang me up and said, come and start a consultancy with us around the corner in Nottingham, and bring whatever staff you want. Let us know what cars you want, and let's get on with it. So I did. And so set up this consultancy, me and two of my colleagues, to start a consultancy operation for this relatively small Nottingham company. And that just boomed. We had sort of 20 employees after 18 months or something. It really boomed. It was amazing. And I was coming back from a project in Holland, I remember, on a plane with my main partner, business partner. And he turned to me and said, "Why don't we do it for ourselves?"
Wow.
Okay, I said, and I resigned the next day, and he did too.
Well, that's a gutsy move, isn't it?
Either gutsy or stupid, Rich.
Yeah. A risk.
Did you and Isabel have a family by then, or was that pre-Ben?
Yeah, we had a family. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably young. Yeah. But in a sense, it's less of a risk because I could have just gone back to consultancy work in computers. You know, try it for 6 months, and if it's a shambles, well, go and get a job, which would reasonably paid. You know, I could certainly live off the salary in those days. So it wasn't that risky, and we'd just done a hell of a lot with this big company, and then we'd done it for this other company without their help at all, really. So it didn't feel like a big risk. It felt radical, really, because it's not in my nature to do that sort of thing. And as I started by saying to you, that none of the main decisions in my life they were actually people suggesting things to me rather than me saying what I want to do next, you know. And that was a good case in point, because it was my business partner who said, let's do it, and I just went along with it. Going to Australia too, you know, somebody said we'd like a job in Australia, you know. Oh, and then with the SPL company, we actually worked in Versailles in Paris, and that was because my boss came in and said, Gary, you want to work in Paris? I go, oh yeah, yeah, that'd be nice. So that, you know, it was not me driving this; it was the world dragging me to these places quite happily. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me, Gary, is all of these experiences that you've had, included setting up your own business. It's they're things that people aspire to do nowadays, but I think obviously things are very different at the moment. I think one of the biggest points of pressure for most people is that social media exists. So there's this sense of always constantly comparing yourself to others, and like just talking about travel, for example, or setting up your own business. People see that stuff constantly on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and I feel like it makes it more difficult in some ways. Like there's always information about how to become a millionaire or how to get a six-figure salary. Do you think it's easier or more difficult nowadays compared to when you were coming up to have those types of experiences?
Very hard for me to say, Ben. I would, you know, I retired 14, 15 years ago. So the period and the technology that you're talking about I've heard about it, but doesn't really exist for me, and
you're not missing anything.
Yeah, and I don't understand all the pressures of it, though I hear about them and know they're there. Yeah.
Did you compare yourself to other people, though, G? Because I think, this show was going to be like called Role Models, and I really consider you a role model to me.
Really?
Yeah. You don't laugh it off, man. Because like literally.
Well, you're a role model to me, Rich. So
shut up. But you know, we talk about stuff at, you know, I guess we're getting to that time period where I show up a little bit, but yeah, we've done things in life. Like I remember we did that holiday where we got the boat over to Calais and drove to Nice, and that was like my favorite holiday ever. You know, and I think I was like 17. I mean, nowadays it'd look a bit risky, you know, like a 45-year-old taking a 17-year-old lad. But I just thought you were like the coolest guy, and you know, and I was experiencing things, you know, traveling through France with you, and you know, I know like you're a bit of a francophile, aren't you? We'll get on to that.
Totally, yes. Like, totally, yes.
But did you who were your who was your role model when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Didn't have any.
I can't recall one really. No. Not really, no. I just got on with things really, Rich, you know.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I talked to like some of my guys that I work with, and you know, those of you who don't know, I'm a drug and alcohol worker, and I do find sometimes people just think a bit too much, rather than get on and do. There's a lot of questioning, who am I,
Yes,
why am
yes.
I? And I think sometimes it is just quite nice to just stop questioning and just go and do something.
It's certainly true that mental health has an issue, is growing in dominance. When I was a lad, nobody didn't even know what it was. It didn't arise for decades. But now mental health is all over the place. All the Premiership footballers seem to have mental health problems, and professional tennis players at the top taking months off for their mental health. Djokovic did that, didn't he? And I think Osaka did that, took 6 months off. But generally, you hear so much now about mental health, and I don't know whether that's because mental health has decayed, and it is more important now, and that may be something to do with social media and what Ben was saying earlier. I don't know. But certainly that has come up as a big subject in the country, in the world, I guess. Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation, because I feel like I see a lot of stuff in documentaries nowadays, and just talking to my parents as well, how different things were in the past, and this concept of masculinity and being tough and having the stiff upper lip and all of that stuff. And I'm not saying if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying comparatively, we're obviously very different as a society nowadays. And there is maybe when you give a name to something, it starts to exist in a more realistic way. I always, talking to my students, that they complain about the weather or whatever, something mundane, and I think about these people, my ancestors, that would crawl through a tunnel to get to the mine that they were going to do a 25-hour shift in, and life comparatively, you can do that at in any period of time. Though it was always worse in the past, wasn't it? Or was it? You tell us. Was it worse in the past?
Well, depends which past you're talking about. I think in Elizabethan times it certainly was.
I mean, do you, what for you in your lifetime? Was there any specific period that was more of a struggle than any other, and was it related to external or internal influences? I have to think about that for a second.
No.
It's just been great the whole time. Good.
Well,
Jolly good.
Well, yeah. The only time I felt strain and stress was when, in my first work, I was not enjoying my work, and it was incredibly hard to get out of bed in the morning, and I wasn't living really. But apart from that, things have gone well. Running my own business had worry about it, because the business was selling consultants, and you just couldn't be sure where the next penny was coming from, and most evenings I would go home worrying about what's going to happen next week. Fortunately, it turned out very well consistently, but that was a type of strain, I suppose.
Didn't your other stomach also explode?
I had perforated
in your office or something? That sounds like a result of a bit of stress, maybe, Gary.
No, it's a bacterium. I forget what it's called, but you just take a tablet now, so that doesn't happen anymore. It was a bacterium in the stomach that did it.
It is interesting though, but you feel like you didn't feel stress, and I think you're kind of saying mental health was not really an issue for you, and
not for me, no. But in the more and more, the older I've got, the more I've been conscious of mental health in amongst the community that I'm in, and in the newspapers and all of this. It might just be that people are now more and more encouraged to give it that name, and more encouraged to talk about their mental issues and this, that, and the other. Well, that is certainly true. My father, I would say, had appalling mental stress, but he never mentioned it. It never occurred to him to to talk to anybody about it. And I think it's different. It's different now, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it's also interesting that that even though it wasn't as prevalent when you were sort of our age or younger, you still appreciate it now. I mean, you've been super supportive to me over the years when I've been suffering with various ailments of the mind and body, and yeah, and you're like one of those guys that checks in with people, and and that's kind of interesting because a lot of people our generation, I mean, I've been shit at it for years when I was just boozing all the time, but a lot of us talk about mental health on Facebook or will repost something or whatever, but actually connecting with people is never been high on the agenda, I don't think. Whereas you seem to have a lot of connections and like a good circle of people that you look out for. Is that fair to say?
That's fair, yes. And yeah, I agree with you. And there are a number of people who have no such connections at all. I know lots of people, or have known lots of people, particularly males, who do not have a friend. You know what I mean? There's lots of people like that.
I think a lot of that has to do with the way that we communicate with each other nowadays, because we have these really kind of disposable methods of communication, like with WhatsApp and sending text messages. It's really, I don't feel that people connect in a realistic way. Like if you were to sit down and write a letter to somebody, you have to take the time to think about precisely what it is that you want to say. And it's not going to arrive for 2 weeks, and then it's going to be another 2 weeks before you get a response. So, in some ways, I think that's better, because nowadays people just, it's very flippant the way that we communicate, and I feel like people feel very disconnected because of that. I don't know, maybe it's the way that we communicate.
Well, I wouldn't say that's a recent thing. Throughout my life, I've known lots of people, and I've known a fair number of them who do not have a friend. Which I don't know when I sort of thought about or realised that, but I find that remarkable, really. How you avoid that, I don't know.
Would you say like friendship's one of like your core values, like a really super important thing to you?
It's super valued. I love wonderful community that I know of, and if I'm having a dinner party, I have to decide which group I'm going to invite. Really, that's fabulous. But I won't say it's deliberate, Rich. It's just the sort of chap I am in a way,
Yeah. What about when COVID hit? Because you'd gone from parties at Gary's house, Ben, were pretty legendary. If
Put up some of your. I'm going to put up some of your band, your music images. You got some of those on screen. There you go.
But like when COVID hit, and I think we're still getting over it. Not COVID as a thing, but COVID as
well, you had it last week.
Yeah, but the way it affected us and like the way we socialise and stuff. Did you find that tough? Because you proper went lockdown, didn't you?
Not really. I'm surprised how content and satisfied I am on my own, Rich. I mean, I live here on my own, and I've got vast acres of time during the week that I have to fill. I'm surprised how well and happily I fill them.
Yeah. a lot of people didn't cope well, though, did they?
Absolutely, absolutely not. No.
And
I think that's part of the mental health discussion we're talking about, because like my dad's generation, you just bloody put up with it. You didn't complain. It was a bit different. Nobody knew that mental health existed then. You had madhouses or people, didn't you? in the days of my parents. But now everybody's got a mental health question, haven't they?
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, Ben's just put up a couple of pictures of God, I'm trying to work out
Gary
what this year was.
shredding on the axe there.
There's me on drums, and I think that's
Craig.
Craig behind
corner,
you.
yeah.
That'll be in Paris, Rich, will it?
No, this is in your living room, actually.
Really?
Pink Panther on the wall.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The Paris story is quite a good one, I think.
Fabulous.
When you retired, wasn't it? You told us it was for your retirement. That was the story I remember. Anyway, so Ben, right? Gary had worked and lived in Paris for quite a while, and you've got a lot of French friends, don't you?
Yeah.
And I reckon it was your retirement too, which would make sense. I was about 25, 26.
No, it was La Fête de la Musique.
Well, that's what we discovered. Because if I'd have told Craig that, there was no way he was coming. So I thought we were going to go and play at someone's house for a retirement party.
Right.
And we get there and they've shut off the street, Ben. And there's like these barriers across the street. And I'm driving in my little yellow Suzuki car with a drum kit in the back and some amps. And my incredible co-pilot was Craig, Ben. I don't know if you've ever been in a car with him. But
yeah, never again.
Useless. Yeah, and so we're driving around Paris. I remember at one bit we got to like a massive roundabout that was like 4 lanes deep, and Gary and his son Ben were in one car, and I was trying to follow you through Paris. And again, this was no sat nav. I didn't have a sat nav. We had a mobile phone, but I don't think I'd worked out how to use it in France with like data roaming or anything. No. And you just took off across this roundabout, and me and Craig were like, fuck, we don't know where he's gone. We had no idea where we're going. And eventually I pulled out in front of a bus because I figured a bus had stopped because there were loads of people that didn't want to die on it. And we caught up with you. And then it was this thing called La Fête de Musique. What is that, G?
La Fête de la Musique. It's held on the day of the summer solstice in the whole of France. And it's the Festival of Music Day, the summer solstice. And everywhere has loads of bands and music and opera, and it's amazing. Just go to France on that day. I don't know whether Spain have such a thing, but we don't hear.
No, not really.
But we headlined, didn't we, G? We headlined that gig.
Absolutely, yeah. And you were on drums, and old Craig was banging away, wasn't
he? Yeah. And
Summertime Blues.
Your Ben, yeah. It was wicked, and it was just like a hell of a weekend. And then we did have a party at your friend's house for your retirement after that, I think.
Did we? Oh, right.
Yeah. Okay. It was in that garden that had loads of levels. Do you remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I go see Gilles a lot.
Gilles, yeah. And Craig got so stoned on the way home, he believed in his head that he could speak French.
I remember this story, yeah.
And we got to customs, and the car stank of whatever Craig had been smoking.
Yeah.
And like, he goes, I've got this, Rich. And rolled the window down and goes, would you like to see my passport? And he thought he was speaking French. I was like, we're getting arrested here.
If you drink enough wine, you do speak French.
It's just guttural sounds, is that what you're saying?
But we were just talking about like parties and stuff at yours. I've always really appreciated them, and like the social side of our friendship has been massive. Like we so me and Gary then sort of became closer. Like my dad and Gary were great friends and were doubles partners in tennis and played chess. And then as I sort of started growing up, I developed a bit of an interest in music, and having zero skill or intelligence, I became a drummer. And Gary was, like kind enough to. I reckon I was 14, maybe the first gig we played together.
Yes, and your chums over in Ravenscroft, was it?
Yeah, well, there was that, but I remember
that was where it all
playing
started. Yeah,
I remember playing with you and Ted and Les in the garage in Truro Close.
yeah, quite possibly, yes.
Yeah, and I think we did like a gig for when the French came over for the tennis club.
That's true. Yes, that's very true. Yes.
And to me, G, like that was like a really big thing, being like
really
14, or I might have even been a bit younger, but playing music with you guys. And I take the piss now about the band and stuff, but like you're a good band, and certainly back then it was like really good fun, and I felt like the coolest guy in the world.
Well, it was a boy band, Rich.
Boy band. Might have been pushing it a bit, but yeah, this is sort of bringing me on to music and how big a influence that's been in your life. Because I mean, music for you is everything. Would that be fair?
Important, let's say. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yes, and I'm quite outspoken about it, really.
So, where does that come from? Were your parents musical?
No.
No?
I've no idea, Richard. It comes from the fact that when I was 14, my pen friend bought me Elvis Presley Good Rocking Tonight.
Wow.
Up till then, I didn't know what music was, and that just took off then.
And you've been a massive Elvis fan forever, haven't you?
Well, indeed, yes. Well, you can't help but admire what he achieved. He changed the world, Rich, to be honest. Or however you look at it, he changed a hell of a lot.
And other than Elvis, like what you got? You're a bit.
There's only one artist for me in the whole world, and that is Joni Mitchell.
Oh yeah.
Nobody else comes anywhere near her.
Gary, this is something that I love talking about, because my parents grew up in Stevenage, just outside London, which was on the circuit, so they got to see in the time of the bingo halls and the dance halls. They got to see some incredible bands that came into Stevenage to practice their show before they made it big. So they got it's incredible, the list of bands that my dad reels off. I mean, like I say, nostalgia for a time I wasn't even alive. What was that like? Because compared to nowadays, I don't know if there's anything in the current musical experience. I know Rich would probably say Taylor Swift, but like I don't think you can experience going to a gig nowadays and seeing something that is genuinely forming a new musical genre or something that you could feel. Did you feel like it was historical at the time when you were experiencing it? Did you think that this was
not at the time? No, I must say no. I didn't really go to any gigs. I'm just not like that, and I haven't throughout my life. But I like listening to some music, and some of it inspires me enormously. But I don't go to gigs, even now I don't, unless it's a Joni Mitchell gig, which I went to a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, no, Joni Mitchell changed my life more than Elvis Presley. I could not believe what she was doing. Unbelievable. We have my daughter also likes, well, my family all like Joni Mitchell, obviously, because that's all they've ever heard. But with my daughter, we sometimes have this discussion where you have to think of your top 10 best records of all time. And both of us, all 10 are Joni Mitchell records. Nobody else gets a look in.
Gee, like, you've got 4 hours until you're 80.
Right, all right, okay.
What's been some of the biggest life lessons you've learned?
Well, the big thing, well, one of the big things, reflecting on my life, whatever I did, people always wanted me to lead it and be the leader and promote me and this, that, and the other. And this was invariably, I was never the best person for the job by any means. Like when we worked in Versailles, we were doing some very complex compiler work for the European Space Agency. And I was nowhere on that. And all these brainy guys were over there. And I was the leader of this. They made me the leader. And that was typical. When we went to Australia with a team of 15, they made me the leader of the 15. And I sort of wondering about this. Why is everybody always making me the leader? And I know why it is. It's because and it's the same with the band, Rich. Why am I in my band? Because you know very well, they are all bloody good musicians, these guys. And I can do C, F, and G, okay? And it's the same there. And the answer is, I am an absolutely brilliant administrator. You want something organized, details fill in, all the gaps plugged. I'm your man. I don't know what it's about, but I'm your man. And I have realized that not many people are, that's actually quite a rare skill. And, I know nearly everybody I know doesn't even have a diary to remember to come to band practice and stuff like that, which is a trivial point of it. But so I have realized that one of my big skills is just administrating and sorting things out and making things get done and get checked and so on and so on. And that's had a big influence on my life. Very big influence. Yeah. I also realize, I could be wrong, but the competition in life is not as good as you expect it to be. I mean, it is obviously sometimes, if you a research fellowship where your ability is, is key. But generally in life, people are sort of happy to stay a bit in the background and this, that, and the other. And if you're prepared to be a bit assertive and go and try and do what you want to do, then the competition is by no means as severe as you fear it is. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's even more relevant nowadays as it ever has been. Based on what I was saying earlier, because people are constantly comparing themselves to others because that it's put in their faces through social media. So
is that right?
Yeah, it's very good advice. So just switch it off. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to impart on us, G?
No.
I think this might end up being a two-part of this.
Really?
Yeah, we've only got to 40. We're only halfway through.
Really?
But I just want to say I really appreciate you as a friend. And,
and that's mutual, Richard. That's mutual.
Yeah, I don't want to get soppy, but like you have been a big influence in my life,
Mhm.
and yeah, a bit like Ben, just someone who's been there through like the not so great times, and
Yeah.
and I appreciate that, man. And yeah, one of my resolutions this year is to spend a bit more time with you, because I've been a bit slack on that recently, and unfortunately, I still have to work, so I can't come out to
Well,
Tuesday morning golf. But
no, I tell you, I feel the friendship doesn't depend on that, Rich. It doesn't depend on anything, doing things, saying things, seeing. I just doesn't feel like it depends on that to me. Yeah, it's there. End of, really.
well, maybe that's your last lesson for this podcast, man. Yeah,
What's
maybe
that? Yeah.
it just doesn't. Yeah, doesn't depend on the material, physical things. It's just there. Gee, I've really enjoyed talking to you, mate.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, good.
We've been banging on
Yeah,
for over an hour.
I'm not used to dominating the discussion in this way. Perhaps we can have one where I listen to you two.
I'll come round and show you how to subscribe on YouTube. Then you have no choice.
Well, especially Ben's experience in Spain, there must be some things to say about that, I would think.
Oh yeah. Let's look. I'm sure that we're going to have another conversation sometime in the future. We can pick up where we left off. So, being the administrative person, I leave it to you to put a bookmark where we finished. Where did we finish, Rich? In the 40s?
No, we weren't quite chronological, were we?
No.
I didn't think.
We got up to East Leek. So sort of like
we got to East Leek,
we'll call it. But yeah, we'll come back.
We'll pick up where we left off. Yeah.
And yeah, you'll have to come on and just put your 2 pennies worth into one of our random conversations.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Ben, you're going to sign us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, happy birthday for a few hours' time.
Oh, God, yeah. Happy birthday.
Thanks so much for those little nuggets of wisdom. It's very interesting listening to the life of somebody who lived in a time that I'll say it again, I feel nostalgic for it, even though I wasn't there. We look forward to having a conversation with you again in the future.
Yeah,
okay,
good.
Right.
Okay.
Off we go. Lovely to speak to you guys. Take it easy.
Yeah, and you. Cheers,
Love you, Ben. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Love you. Bye.